Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Mental Ill Health and Co-occurring Issues Explored workshop. And if you just entered the workshop and your name is not clear, could you just please make sure that you name yourself and add your service as well, just so that when we're interacting, we can have a good networking experience knowing who we're working with. This workshop's been provided annually for more than a decade and aims to connect you with local providers, as well as providing you with knowledge and skills to better manage complexity in your work with people. I'm Bronwyn Williams and I'm the Eastern Mental Health Service Coordination Alliance Coordinator. We call this Alliance EMSCA. On behalf of the presenters of this webinar today, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet virtually. We recognise their continued connection to the land and waters of the beautiful home we share and acknowledge that they never ceded sovereignty. We pay respect to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, and to First Nations people joining us online today. And we welcome and celebrate diversity at EMSCA as we reflect the variety of cultures and communities we serve. Our alliance strives for true collaborative practice and a spirit of inclusivity for all. EMSCA recognises that poorer health outcomes are associated with experiences of discrimination and marginalisation, and we challenge inequities in the development and delivery of health and community service. Also, EMSCA recognises those individuals and their supporters who have a lived experience of mental ill health and the important contribution that they make to the development and delivery of health and community services. Now, let's warm up with some polls. So we'll be using the Slido application today to engage with live polls and also Q&A. To access the Slido, you can just scan this QR code or simply search for Slido on your phone, tablet or computer via your favourite search engine. I highly recommend that you become involved in the Slido. It's just so much easier than using the chat when it comes to the Q&A. So I'd prefer that you save the chat for things like feedback for presenters, asking a question that's related to the webinar, not so much the content. But the Q&A function will really help us to prioritise the key questions that people would like answered during the short time that we have for our Q&A in each workshop. Now, we've got a poll to start the day. So our first poll is designed to help everybody know who's in the room. So if you can please answer in a word which health or community service sector you represent today. For example, mental health, homelessness, family services, AOD, NDIS, local council, etc. And you can see, is the screen still sharing? No, okay. I'll go back to sharing the screen. Here we go. And you can see there that we have a large representation from mental health services, family services, home-based care, youth mental health, some folks from AOD, disability unemployment, that's a good one, lived experience workforce, disability services, a few more from AOD. That's terrific. Thanks, folks. Youth mental health's coming up strong now. Great. Now I'm just going to navigate back to our slideshow. So let's keep moving. This event is a two-part series, and you'll have the details in the booklet I emailed you on Wednesday. You'll receive a copy of the slides this afternoon. We're recording today's session and this will be available on EMSCA webpage later in the week. We have 5 engaging and knowledgeable presenters for you today. Kerry Ann will provide you with some guidance about how to approach complexity from her lived experience perspective. Brian will speak with you about mental illness and homelessness. And Gavin, Graham and Rose will work with you regarding how to approach the complexity of substance use and mental ill health. Please see your workshop booklet for the full program and presenter information. All right, let's go to Slido again for another poll. What's the most common co-occurring issue, not mental health, that you come across in your work? So I'm just going to move the poll here. There we go. Looks like most people have managed to get into Slido, which is fantastic. What's the most common co-occurring issue, not mental health, that you come across in your work every day? Family violence, okay. Substance use, pain, addiction. AOD, trauma, sleep issues, yeah. Housing instability. So substance use, trauma and family violence are coming up really strongly. And obviously AOD is substance use. Addiction. Well, that's really great to see, because obviously the topics that we're addressing throughout this two-part webinar series, most of them have been mentioned here. We'll be looking at family violence next week. And this week, we're certainly looking at substance use, AOD and mental health, and homelessness or housing instability. Terrific. The workshop topics that we have for this series that we've run this series every year for about 11 years. And the workshop topics have changed this year, and that's really in response to the feedback that we've had from participants over the years, particularly last year, that these were the hot topics that people wanted to know about: homelessness, substance use, family violence and gambling. So we prioritised those in our webinar. Okay. Thank you for participating in that poll. Just going to escape again and go back to our slideshow. As we'll break into groups, we've assigned staff to facilitate the discussions, and you'll be assigned to rooms at 2 points in today's webinar. When this occurs, you will not need to move yourself at all. Just allow Tom to move you around. Ruben is available for tech support and also will moderate the questions in the Slido. If you're unsure of any acronyms or terms, please feel free to ask people in your small group. Someone's bound to know, as you will be in a cross-sector group. The EMSCA Implementation Committee is responsible for the development and delivery of all EMSCA events. And here's a list of the people involved in this event today. And we thank them for their work. It takes a village. This is EMSCA. The EMSCA Implementation Committee members are all part of this multi-level alliance. EMSCA aims to strengthen mental health and AOD service collaboration, coordination and system integration across the inner and outer eastern Melbourne for improved consumer outcomes. You may recognise your own logo on this slide. You'll be well aware that people with complex needs often fall through the cracks in service delivery between federal and state service delivery, between government and non-government services, and between services delivered by different agencies. Often service providers can feel at a loss for how best to help someone with complex support needs. And whose job is it? This event aims to support you to work more effectively with a range of complex issues as we work to prevent intra-service gaps in support. Okay, another Slido poll. How confident are you in working with complex issues? This is anonymous too. I don't have anybody's name against this, so it's fine just to pop in your responses. And most people will be here today because they were interested in addressing complexity. And that's fantastic. It's really great to be able to offer some good specialist advice. I'm seeing quite a range of responses to this question. And I guess, you know, we're not dictating which complexity, so you know, you might be really confident with addressing particular complexity and others not so confident. Terrific. Thank you for your responses again. I've just got one more poll for you this morning. What is your greatest challenge when working with complexity? Yep, knowledge, great. If anyone's having difficulty finding the poll, just go into Slido, the application that I mentioned earlier. You'll just need to go to the Slido application on your tablet or phone. There's a QR code too that you can use here on the screen that if you just QR it, you'll be able to get in. Terrific. Okay, service collaboration. Absolutely. And that's what EMSCA is all about. We're really wanting to support good service collaboration. And that comes from knowing other providers. So hopefully in this workshop today, you'll meet plenty of other providers and you can certainly catch up after EMSCA events to, really solidify those engagements. Systems, confidence, knowledge, gaps in services. Yeah, gaps in services. And what are those gaps? Yeah, that's a really important question.
Right.
All right, somebody might not be on mute that needs to be on mute. That's okay. I'm just going to go back to our slideshow again now. Terrific. Okay, it wouldn't be an EMSCA event if I didn't remind you of the key local shared care practices. You can find these in your event booklet as Appendix A and also by going to the EMSCA webpage under Connections, you'll be able to find the EMSCA Shared Care Protocol. Share them with your colleagues as we raise awareness of the importance of a joined up approach to working with people, particularly those who have complex support needs. All of these practices will make working with complex issues more doable for you. So you can see it's important that we know who's involved, that we take care when we share information, that we look at the whole picture and that we have an integrated approach, that we work as a shared care team, and that includes working with carers and keeping them in the loop. Working with the person is central to the care team, and also just really identifying if there are any dependents that are taking on care roles or if dependents need additional support as well. Now I'd like to introduce you to Kerry Ann, who is a lived experience advisor. Kerry Ann, can you just unmute yourself? Is Kerry Ann in the room? Oh, here she is. She's just getting in. Sorry, guys. Looks like she might have dropped out again.
Hi.
Hi, is that you, Kerry Ann?
It is. Hi.
Oh, fantastic. I'm going to spotlight you now.
Can you see me?
Yeah, we're going to see you now. Can everyone see Kerry Ann? Yep, great. Okay, I'd like to introduce Kerry Ann now. She's got a lived experience advisor, and Kerry Ann has navigated a complex journey to supports and is keen to share her story of recovery in an effort to help others. Kerry loves creative writing, gardening and nature, and she's the mother of an adult son who's been a huge support to her along her journey. And Kerry Ann will introduce our workshop topic as she shares her advice with all of you today. So welcome, Kerry Ann.
Hi guys, my name's Kerry Ann. I'm 54 years of age. I've got an adult son who is 30 years of age. I have complex issues with borderline personality disorder, depression, anxiety, alcoholism is a key factor, and childhood trauma. Gosh, it's been a hard road, a long, hard road. But my story today doesn't define who I am. I continue my journey every single day, and it's a lived experience, and it was hard at the start, but as time has gone on, it's got a lot easier. I have a psychiatrist, I have a psychologist, I have a grief counsellor, and they're all intertwined with how I live today. What else can I tell you? Today I'm 2 years, 2 months sober, and that is not, that hasn't been an easy road because there's been lots of relapses, lots of going back to what I used to do, lots of self-sabotage. But I'm able to see today where my journey was, how I am today, and living with what I have. As I said, it doesn't define me. It makes me a lot stronger. I live with strength and hope today, and a lot of courage, and it's taken a lot to get me to where I am. So there's some slides that you'll see, and they have key points next to them, and I'll share a little bit about each one. And let's go from there. This first slide is really relevant to me. This is my journey. At the root of all addiction, there is pain, and I struggled with copious amounts of pain. And the slide on the other side says, remember her. Well, she's the little one within me that I still struggle with today to find, but she's in there, and she's learning how to grow the way I am, because I struggled with childhood trauma. My first rehab was in 2007. Pardon me. I've done copious rehabs, detoxes, my experience with childhood trauma and all the diagnoses I have all running to one. My biggest, I think, default for me was self-sabotage. I would go into rehab and I would find any way to get out of there quickly because I wanted to go back to my old behaviours, and self-sabotage was a big one. These slides are a big part of my life because on the left-hand side you can see there's quite a graphic picture of a person who, that's me. And the butterfly is a sign of tenderness to say that, you know, there is hope, and that through the struggles of my life, I'm at a point now where that butterfly is a touchstone in my life because it's brought me to where I am today. And it's been a lot of pain, a lot of tears, a lot of help, outside help. And today I use a lot of tools to help me get through my moments where I'm not coping, because there are tremendous moments in my life where I don't cope, because these diagnoses sit with me today. But I understand today what I have, and alcohol addiction is one of the main factors in my journey. And my son actually struggles with anxiety and panic disorder. I don't know if that's genetic, but he, pardon me, I think a lot of it is due to the fact that he saw his mother in addiction and some pretty serious things he witnessed. But that's okay today. We are working on our relationship, and it's a lot stronger. And I'll go to the next slide. Challenges to getting support. Oh my goodness, I could talk a leg off a chair with this. As you can see, you're now entering no judgment zone. I had a lot of struggles with judgment. I felt a lot of shame and guilt. I felt a lot of aloneness and hopelessness because of the fact that I kept relapsing and I could never find a way out of the spider web I was in. There were financial constraints, waiting times, constantly changing support workers. My story's been told multiple times to different workers, and when I thought I was on the right track, I'd lose a worker and have to grab another one and rehash my old story. And that brought up a lot of pain for me. And I never could sit comfortable in my own skin because I would have someone and then lose someone. Public housing was a big one. I currently now live in private rental. There is a stigma with public housing, and I felt extremely judged, and I felt I didn't belong where I was living. There were too many complexity issues with constant people relapsing, dramas, drunkenness. I did have the public housing to my detriment, but I didn't feel I belonged there. And part of my journey today was getting out of public housing and being able to say to myself, you know what, I can live in a normal world of private rental and have a much quieter world. And that's been a really big thing for me. Financial constraints, money and finances were out of control. There were times where I had to scrape at the bottom of the barrel to try and get money to buy medications, and they're on a monthly basis, and I have medications from my psychiatrist that I regularly take, and you know, some of them aren't cheap, but I need to have those today in my life to keep my brain and my mind in a good place. You know, I lost hope. I lost a lot of hope when I didn't know where to turn, and through constant relapsing, it was extremely difficult to get to even get time up for sobriety and then relapse again. I felt so alone, and aloneness was a big part of me, I guess, and that does go with the changing of support workers, because I needed someone to rely on. I needed to know that there was someone at the end of the day that would be there and that I could share my needs and wants with. So there's some of the key points, and waiting times. Waiting times were ridiculous. I needed help there and then. And if I needed to go somewhere, the waiting times could be lengthy, and that was a huge challenge. And we'll go to our next slide. Challenges to getting support. That was this headpiece with all these happy, sad, frustrated, angry little faces in them. That was me. That was me. It can still be me today, but I've got tools today to help me with that. Shame, guilt and fear were the biggest components. Shameful after relapsing, guilt through all the terror, all the pain and everything I was doing in my addiction. My son struggled a lot with that. There were also fear lived with me like I'm back. prioritising hard. I needed to stop drinking before I could assess my mental health. And I know out there are people that do struggle with constant relapse. But for me, I only knew what life was like when I put down the drink and what I could endure if I did stay stopped from drinking. And that was a big factor. I don't live with fear today. False evidence appearing real, and my mind will try and trick me into thinking that a drink is okay today to have, and I cannot drink today. I cannot drink. It's not part of my story today. I stay sober one day at a time because I know for me to have a drink today is to die.
Wow.
And we can go on to the next slide. Living in recovery is a beautiful way to live today. That picture is a frame that I actually did myself through creative art. It means a lot to me. The day I put that photo together, I was in tears because I never thought I could get sober, ever, ever, ever. I lived in a world of constant chaos. The biggest thing for me today is living in acceptance, understanding my diagnoses, understanding that it is okay to live with dual diagnosis. It's not easy at times, and I want to throw the towel in at times, but I know that each time I speak to my psychiatrist, to my psychologist, and intertwine those two, there is hope, and I have hope today. Commitment with all the things that were happening for me in active addiction no longer happen. I have regular supports, and I have to keep a commitment to that today. And that's keeping up appointments with my psychiatrist, engaging with my psychologist, talking about the things that affect me at that moment and that have affected me. Choosing healthier relationships. I had to get rid of, well, I wouldn't say get rid of, I had to put away things in a box that were really toxic for me, and that was family. I don't see my family today, and the reason I have done that is because I am at high risk of relapsing if they still have a lot of issues, and it's really a setup for relapse. So I deal with that with thinking about why it upsets me and what hurts me is a really, really key point. I have a flashcard that's sitting on my mirror, and every morning I look at it, and it says I am loved and I am enough. And that's all I need. If I'm struggling on any day, I look at that and I read it, and it has slowly sunk into my head that that's where I am at today. And helping others is part of my story. AA is a really, really big component. I am a very happy member in AA today, and I also have a sponsor, and I have a sponsee. And a sponsee is someone I help who is in early recovery, and it helps me to stay sober because she is where I was 2 years ago. And to listen to her story and to be able to give her just points on how she can stay sober today. And I'll give you a little example. She has been really struggling with her sobriety, and she has rung me several times and said, I'm standing outside a bottle shop and I want to drink. And that was me. And I have talked her down, and I have told her that a drink today will not change anything that's going on. Won't change a thing. In fact, it'll make it 10 times worse. And her name is Christine. And we've become really good friends, and she's a really, really lovely person. And it gives me great hope and strength and courage to be able to help her. And Did I mention regular supports? Yeah, regular supports. I need them today. They are like a second person for me. So they have to stay in my life every day. I may need ongoing therapy for a lifetime, because the lifetime of struggle I had was from a little girl right up until my last rehab in 2019, which was at MARP. And I'm extremely grateful to MARP. That is the Maroondah Addiction Recovery Program. I'm forever in awe of gratefulness for them. And that's about it for that. I live a pretty happy life today in recovery. And the next slide, ooh, I love this one. Recovery is about progression, not perfection. I am a perfectionist and I want everything to be as I want it right now in a little box. Doesn't work like that. Listening, I needed to be heard. I need my story to be heard. And if my story today, if someone can walk away with something that resonates in my story to help someone else, my mission is accomplished. Being open to the individual's journey, and that comes back to a lot of, innuendos of, oh my God, I've done it again. Oh my God, I've relapsed. Why don't I understand why I do what I do? That was a really hard thing for me. And I sat in a lot of sadness over that, because I never could get anything right with my recovery. I just couldn't get it right. And the turning point for me was getting into a detox again and putting a commitment in place. And that commitment was going to MARP, and that was a 6-month stay. And that gave me a lot of hope, because I never ever had 90 days sober, 2 months sober, 1 month sober. I would do a detox. I'd be out of there and I'd be back to the bottle shop, and I would put everything on the wayside. Don't want to deal with it. No, I don't want to listen to that. So that was the turning point for me. Holding hope for recovery, even when I can't see recovery from hope for myself. Others give me hope, and that's talking to my outside help. If I'm struggling and things are really tough, I know I've got hope. Hold on, pain ends. Hold on, pain ends. And I know there's going to be a day in my life where I'm going to be able to sit with myself and say, you know what? I'm okay today. And I am a survivor of what has happened to me. And that I can sit here today and say to you guys that I'm proud of that, really, really proud of that. Recovery involves setbacks, and help is needed fast. That is, how can I say that? I needed availability. I have availability today. And the key reason I have availability today is because I keep in touch regularly with my psychiatrist and my psychologist. I keep my appointments. I'm not hungover. I'm not drunk the night before, and I make an attempt every time I've got an appointment to keep it. Because these are the people on the other side of my story that can help me and give me tools and tips and medication to keep me on an even balance. Lived experience, my experience has been lived. And there's been many, I didn't mention, but many suicide attempts my son witnessed, many things in recovery today that work that did not work back then. Reassessing my mental health. When I got sober and I put down the drink, when I was drinking, I acted out a lot, and that was with self-sabotage, anger, rage, fear. combined into one. And I felt if I didn't get what I want, I was going to cause everybody else around me a problem. I don't self-sabotage today because the tools are what I use to not do that. And I understand that comes from a lifetime of struggle with addiction, childhood trauma, dual diagnoses. I've got BPD disorder, which is borderline personality disorder. I'm quite unique in that because I can be an absolute mad woman and then I can be someone else. And my son would say to me, Mum, I'm getting 5 different people here. Who are you? I don't know who you are. I don't know who you are when I pick the phone up. And today he has a mother that he's proud of, a mother that loves him. He loves me. And we work on our relationship today. And the key point to that is do not pick up a drink. No matter what is going on in my life, do not pick up a drink. And that's with outside help. And when I say my mental state, reassess my mental state, my mental state was in chaos when I was in addiction. And the fundamental thing of my drinking was my inhibitions were gone. Alcohol changes every thought process in your head. So you think you are Superman. And now that I am sober, I've been able to have my mental health reassessed and it's more adjusted through my medications because they weren't working when I was drinking. You know, just I don't act out a lot of part of the diagnoses I have today. And when I say that, I can get to a point where I think I'm going to act out, but I get intervention. I get people involved to help me, to stop me from doing that because my head can still go to a place of self-sabotage and trying to create a world I don't want to live in today of chaos. And the biggest thing for me in knowing today, when I was drinking and in addiction, my world was never safe. I didn't have a safe place to be. Today, I do have a safe place to be because I understand today that I have all these things, diagnoses in my life, but I can live with them today. And it's not a monkey on my back. And family, I'll end with one of the things that happened for me was when I went to rehab, my son was left on the outer. He was left behind. He had no support. He was couch surfing. We lost a home. We lost several homes. Jobs, finances were all gone because I couldn't get my addiction under control. And he struggled with that. He suffered a lot. But today, he's a lot better. His mum is getting better. His mum is in recovery and he is in recovery too. And when I say that, each step of the way that I take staying sober, his life improves. And his life is in a good place today. He's career orientated, he's settled, he has a lovely person in his life he lives with. Life is not easy for him either, but we are able to talk out what is going on for him. And he's not at a point in his life where he's actually talking to people about what has happened for him. He talks to me about it. And that is a real crucial point because he was stuck in all the problems of what happened to his mother. And me being honest and living with acceptance of what has gone on, he knows he's going to get a mum that cares and loves him on the other end of the phone. He's not going to get someone raging out of control. So these are some of the components that are part of my story. It's been an absolute honour to be here today, and thank you, Bronwyn, for asking me to do this. I was actually really, really nervous before I came on today, and I thought to myself, will I read it off a script? Then I thought, no, I'm just going to read it off part of what my experiences are, because most things come to the forefront of my mind and I remember them distinctly, and they're moments that are okay today, because I never thought recovery was possible for me. I always thought my tombstone was going to have, she's a drunk, and she never made it. But today I can say I am in recovery. I live an okay life today. I'm not happy all the time. I'm not happy all the time, and I still have moments where I'm like, oh, I can't do this. But with all the support I have and the linking of the chain has brought me to where I am today. So thank you, thank you, thank you for having me. And I hope my story can help someone else. So thanks, Bronwyn, for having me today. And thank you to Faye, who is my psychologist. I have to say it. She is amazing. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kerry-Ann, and just congratulations for more than 2 years sober. That's just an immense achievement. And we're just so glad to have you here today to share your inspiring story. I had an amazing journey with Kerry-Ann over the last couple of weeks as we explored her story. And I feel very privileged to have been able to go that journey with you, Kerry-Ann. So thank you for your bravery today, your courage, getting out here in front of all these people.
I'm a bit emotional.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, it's what a fantastic thing to do. And Bronwyn, you are a shining light. Thank you so much. And it's been, as I said, it's been a privilege to be able to share what I've gone through. And just to say to everybody out there, whoever's listening, recovery is awesome, and it can be done. Can be done.
Thank you for giving us that hope too. Thanks very much, Kerry-Ann. Take care.
You
now
too.
You can stick around if you like. You're welcome to stay with us. It's up to you whether you've got a busy day ahead or whether you want to just spend some time hearing other people talk and being part of
I'd love to. I would absolutely love to. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to take you off the spotlight now, and we'll say goodbye to Kerry-Ann.
Thanks, guys.
Wow. Okay. Now we're just going to move on now to hear from Brian Majonga. Now, Brian is the team leader of the EHOPs, or Eastern Homelessness Outreach Psychiatric Services program at Eastern Health. In fact, Brian was involved in setting this team up about a year ago. Brian will introduce you to the key principles of supporting people who have mental illness and co-occurring homelessness. So take it away, Brian. Now, if you have any trouble moving your slides, Brian, let me know and I'll do it for you, because I'm not sure how easily that's going to work, but I've certainly enabled the remote control. Here we go. Lovely.
Okay, thank you. Well, as Brian said, I'm Brian Majonga. I'm the team leader for EHOPs based out in Ringwood East. We cover the whole of the Eastern region, Central and Outer East, and predominantly work with people that present with mental health challenges and co-occurring homeless challenges as well, and substance use challenges. I use the word challenges a lot. I will just go on to the next slide. And this, these stats were pulled up from the last census in 2016, before the one we've had this year. And so that just goes to show the problem, I guess, with homelessness in Australia. And what's striking is I'm looking at the bottom right bit where it says 45% of people by lack of housing essentially is the predominant reason for them experiencing homelessness, which is for a first world country. It hasn't improved as much over the last 4 years in my experiences, and so it is truly a disturbing issue in Australia today, and not just Australia. I've previously I worked in England for a number of years, and it is the same issue over in England, and I'm sure all across the world as well. Any particular observations in relation to these stats at all, while people look at them before we move on to the next slide? Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. I'll just check if I haven't gone ahead of myself. No. Okay. So this next slide is the co-occurring issues that we find with consumers that identify as homeless. So as it says there, people are often marginalized. They often have minimal social supports, and these social supports usually are not maintained owing to the transiency of our cohort. So if you moving across different catchment areas, there's a high risk of people falling through the gaps, lack of follow-up, and that certainly sees people losing their social supports often. Often disengaged with health services. Again, transiency is an issue with people that don't follow through with mental health, physical health output. So that is an issue. Co-occurring physical health issues. Again, we find that consumers don't often prioritize their physical health because of the presenting challenges around homelessness and mental health and substance use as well. So a lot of the times, because we are an assertive outreach team, I think we are better placed than other clinic-based teams to support people with attending appointments with their GPs or setting up linkages, which will allow them to undergo physical health reviews and treatment as well. Substance use I've mentioned already. There is a high proportion, I'll say about close to 90% of our current cohort do present with substance use challenges, in addition to obviously the mental health aspect and the homelessness as well. Risk of further social disengagement. I alluded to that as well at the start of the slide. I think it is an advantage that our team at the moment is covering the whole of the Eastern, which is quite a vast geographical area. So, we follow people across the outer East and Central East areas. But equally, if somebody moves across to a catchment area outside of Eastern Health, we tend to remain in place in terms of our engagement for at least a couple of weeks while we transition the person to the responsible mental health team or housing supports team over to where they've moved, because quite often people will move back into the eastern region, and if we discharge somebody who isn't well engaged with the team we've discharged them to, it's highly unlikely that they'll be referred back to us. Vulnerability, high risk of exploitation, that goes without saying, that people that are experiencing homelessness and mental health are certainly at a higher risk of vulnerability and exploitation, and that certainly contributes to the ongoing challenge, I suppose. I'll move on to the next slide very quickly. I'll click that. What can services do? I guess the first instance would be to assess and provide the appropriate services for that person, and our response is very critical, I guess. We are not a crisis intervention team. We rely on our CAT teams for that, but equally, because of our ability to go out and engage consumers on their turf, so to speak, I think this certainly allows us to respond in a much quicker manner than clinic-based services, and so that reduces the risk, for example, of somebody entering an acute phase of their illness or their challenge, or just reducing the risk of the potential for admission, which in certain occasions can be detrimental to that person's recovery at that stage. Identifying existing formal and informal supports, absolutely. I think with formal supports, we're talking about, for example, GPs, as I was alluding to previously. Informal supports can be family. Quite often, there is a strained family relationships with the people that we work with. So trying to re-engage them in those supports is quite key. Strengthening partnerships, I think, again, goes without saying. We have regular conversations with our colleagues who provide accommodation services, and without them, then I think we wouldn't exist to an extent. We are primarily a mental health service, but certainly we find that the homelessness services are absolutely key to maintaining engagement for our consumers within the community. Provide integrated treatment and support. Again, that is key. We have to work in partnership with our colleagues in health and homelessness services and beyond. I think being, again, talking about our ability to go out and about, I think that we're able to transport our consumers to appointments with each, for example, when we have people that require certain treatment that can only be provided by nurse practitioners, we are able to facilitate attending those appointments, which without that kind of service, it would be very, very difficult for our consumers to do that off their own back. I'll go on to the next slide. I really want to get quickly to participation, joint participation, rather than me just talking. So this is just an overview of our service. Specialist mental health assessment, treatment and support, collaborative partnerships, as I've spoken about that already, family consumer, create and maintain access to services supports, ensure mental health needs are met. I think it's worth just reminding, we always like to remind the people that we work with, and I guess the supports outside of that, that essentially we are, for referral purposes as well, that we are a mental health a service, because quite often when you have, we've got homelessness in our title, and that sometimes creates some confusion from referrers' point of view, because we quite often have referrals because people think that we have a stock of housing, which I wish we had, that we can kind of access as and when, which isn't the case, of course. So it will take a while. We're only 1 year in existence, so it will take a while for people to get around the idea that we are primarily a mental health service and not an accommodation provider. Assertive outreach. It's a wonderful model of engagement. Quite often we find with our consumers, because prioritization is around housing and day-to-day activities, we find that clinic-based appointments are quite often challenging for them to meet. And so going out and about and engaging people in their own environments is so key to not only building rapport, but ensuring that person feels they are important, that, you know, they are the center of our engagement, the purpose of our engagement. It's wonderful. I absolutely love the way we engage. There are instances, of course, where because of risk issues, environment, and it could be the person themselves, we have to engage with them in a clinic. Strength-based, absolutely. It's collaborative, and so we've got to remind ourselves as clinicians that I guess the person's perspective is very, very important to consider in suggesting or directing people to what we believe from a clinical point of view is the best treatment model to an extent. Harm minimization. We certainly not a team that will, we do have our colleagues in dual diagnosis who we work closely with, but what we try to avoid is that finger pointing directive approach where you are telling people that, you know, this is what you need to be doing, as opposed to acknowledging the challenges in which they find themselves, and providing them with, for example, injection kits to minimize any kind of potential harm through the use of substances, and working towards, I guess, possible abstinence, but that's certainly in a collaborative manner rather than a directive. You are going to, this is what we think is right for you, you should be doing this ABC. So it works better that way, I find. That's our team. We've got a consultant psychiatrist. She's absolutely fantastic. She actually does depots, which is very different. Our previous psychiatrist as well, she did depots. So we've got such a flexible and agile team. We've also got a psych reg. We've got 2 other social workers. All the clinicians in EHOPs are senior, just because of the nature of our work. We've got to have somebody with the requisite experience to kind of manage the dynamic changes that occur on a minute by minute, day by day basis with our consumers. And we do have senior mental health nurses. At the moment, we've got 2. We're actually recruiting for another, because we do depots. A vast majority of our current consumer load are on depots. So we go out and we give depots everywhere, in the back of cars, in people's rooms, on the side of streets, and this is again the reason why we need senior clinicians that are able to be that flexible, because quite often people attending clinics, as I mentioned earlier, can be challenging for a number of reasons. Moving on to the next slide. We have 7-day service as well. We just operate a single shift, so 8 to 4:30 to maybe 5 o'clock. Over the weekend, we have two clinicians on site. And after hours, of course, we've got our CAT and triage service for our consumers to call upon as and when required. These are referral pathways. For anybody outside of the Easter Health mental health service, referrals have to go through triage. But any other mental health service can direct referrals to us. But I will always encourage people to just give us a call first. I should actually have given you my our duty number, which I can share later. And that's essentially. I'll just go into the next slide. I think we've spoken a little bit about this. This are the kind our consumer. These are kind of the characteristics that they present with: severe persistent mental illness, itinerancy, transient accommodation, alcohol resistant use, forensic backgrounds. We do have a few of our consumers that have been through the criminal justice system, or are still going through the criminal justice system, perceived as having difficult and or risky behavior, which is quite often a reason why people are not engaged with GPs, because they've been excluded because of reported behavioral concerns. So when somebody's been excluded for so many GPs, they give up, and they don't, because they've internalized that rejection to an extent. So it can be quite difficult. But we do have certain GPs, it's unfortunate to say this, but we do have certain GPs that are more open or more understanding of the challenges faced by the homeless population and who present with mental health challenges. So yeah, it's a big issue. Difficult to engage as a result of this behavior, impaired judgment, insight to the mental health, often lost to follow up, another big reason. Negative experience of mainstream services, I've just mentioned that, and difficulty navigating complex service system. Look, the mental health system, even for us who have had experience from a clinical point of view, it can be quite confusing. So let alone somebody who's trying to access NDIS, for example, trying to access just basic mental health services. At the moment, we've got challenges across the board in terms of staffing levels, and so that makes it so much more difficult for somebody who's not used to picking up the phone and calling and going through the system as is required by very rigid at times criteria and processes. Financial difficulties, absolutely. I think 99.9% of our cohort do face financial challenges, and so we support them through the very tricky Centrelink referral access process as we go along. Just go on to the next slide very quickly. It takes a while. I'm clicking, and oh, here we go. Our criteria: adults between the ages of 18 and 64. As I mentioned, mental illness with significant psychosocial functional impairment, requiring ongoing psychiatric treatment. Person is considered to be homeless or at risk of becoming homelessness across the 3 types of homelessness: primary, tertiary, and secondary. Disengaged from family or other support networks, risk of further decline in social functioning, increased vulnerability, and person is either unable to, avoids, or finds difficulty with maintaining engagement with traditional generic health and social services, including other Eastern Health mental health services. And that's, the traditional clinic-based appointments where, I'll give you this appointment, come in on Tuesday next week at 2:30. Quite often, because people are living, they're quite transient, they will lose their appointment cards. A lot of our consumers don't have mobile phones and don't keep mobile phones, so it's very hard for them to remember appointments at certain times. And the last one there may be subject to psychiatric treatment order under the Mental Health Act. We, at this particular moment, 70% of our consumers are on community treatment orders. So that we usually keep in the background, and we engage with people without having on the basis of, you're on an order, you need to be doing A, B, C, and D. That usually doesn't work very well, and so we try and not make reference to being on a CTO as much as we can, because that it just creates a collaborative approach, rather than, this person is on one side of the divide and I'm on the other, and it can be quite challenging, quite difficult. But anyway, this is our case presentation. Jamie is a current consumer of EHOPs. Jamie is not her real name. We're just using for this purpose. She's 24 years old. She's been homeless and itinerant for the past 5 years, across, the primary, tertiary, and secondary descriptions. She had no formal or informal supports prior to engaging with us. She has a diagnosis of schizophrenia, anorexia, and substance use disorder, meth and others. She did
Brian, your voice is gone. We've lost your audio. Brian, we've completely lost Brian's audio.
Apologies, I've just seen
Can we
someone
go
say,
back a step? We lost a bit of that, probably
yes,
about a minute.
It just went. I don't know what my laptop does.
Not
at
a
time.
problem.
Where had I ended? I'll just do it again. Jamie, 24 years. That's not her real name. She's been itinerant. She's been homeless for the last 5 years. No formal or informal supports. And by homeless itinerant, she's been living on the streets, temporary accommodation, SRSs, motels across the 3 different descriptions of homelessness. schizophrenia, anorexia nervosa, and substance use disorder she has been diagnosed with. She was admitted to an inpatient unit following an overdose, the second last admission, and she was in intensive care at that time for about a week because of she attempted suicide by use of polypharmacy drugs. She does have a history of suicide attempts, and a partner has been incarcerated for drug and sexually related crimes, which are a stressor for Jamie. So that's just a quick overview of Jamie, and I'll just go on to the next slide, which are the questions. And I think, Bronwyn, you will be putting people into breakout rooms. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, Tom's got the breakouts all sorted with
Fantastic.
cross-sector groups, and we'll be shooting into the breakouts after you read out the questions.
Wonderful. Does anyone have any quick questions? Or do I ask people if they've got questions at this point, Bronwyn?
No, that's fine. We can just discuss it in the groups. Thank you very much, Brian.
All good.
Tom, let's go. So when you get into your breakout, just turn your video on, introduce yourself to your group, and you have a facilitator in the room who will be supporting the discussion. And we'll be in there for 20 minutes. So just accept the invitation now to go into your breakout. If you fall out of your breakout room, Tom will be in the main room to pop you back in.
Bronwyn, you might need to add yourself to room 5.
Okay, I will do that. Looks like there's a few people not assigned. Amelia can go in.
Yeah, I'm having some internet issues, so I think I dropped out as it was being assigned.
No worries, Amelia. I'll get you in.
Thank you.
Tom, I was in the breakout room and I couldn't put video or audio on.
That's weird.
Okay.
Not sure why that would be. Now, Kerry, you're welcome to stay in the main room, or you can go into one of the breakouts. It's up to you. If you'd like to be assigned to join a group for discussion. Rose, similarly.
Yeah, I'm not in the room either yet, Tom.
Peter could go
Sorry,
in.
Peter.
I'm sure you've got a few things to do. It's okay.
Not sure why Ruben couldn't turn on.
No, I don't know either. That's really odd. So just let Tom know if you want to go into a breakout room. I'm going to pop into room 5 now because that's my job to do that. And I'll see you all back in 20 minutes.
Basically, so basically in housing. Yeah, I've been doing that for I'm relatively new to the role.
Looks like most people are back. That's fantastic. Brian, I'm going to give it back to you now, mate, and
Okay.
you can engage the facilitators. They've all got plenty to share with you. And I think perhaps if we just go through, oh yeah, share screen. I think perhaps if we just go through the questions, Brian, and each group had a number so they can perhaps answer those questions per their number.
Okay. I was in the group that had question 1 and 2. Does anyone want to talk about or respond, give feedback to those 2 questions?
I'll be the spokesperson, and it was great having you in the room. Thank you, Brian. It was good getting more substance to the story, but I guess we'll start off with the initial approach would be to ask Jamie what she wanted, because her life circumstances have changed considerably. Her partner, who was quite controlling in the relationship, is now incarcerated and she's on her own, and her life circumstances have, not only is she homeless, but she's on her own, which makes it a very different experience for her. So I think it's really important to see what she wants. And it's once you've understood that, then you can start looking at how you move forward, and you start building a plan with Jamie, and you work collaboratively with her. And then it's like, in the past, they've burnt bridges at different services, but because her situation is different now and she has got mental health involved, you could be more of an advocate for her with the services that she's burnt her bridges with in the past. And if you can say there's collaborative services working with her and this is our plan, it may open up opportunities for her. And new opportunities also exist now because she is in treatment for mental health. She has more options that would be opening up for her. So that was basically how we would round the answers to the question number 1. Question number 2, we spoke about this at the end, but I'm going to put it at the beginning. It's how do you build rapport and a trusting therapeutic relationship? And I think for clinicians, when we're working with people, we need to be authentic. We need to take that into the room, our authenticity, when we meet Jamie, because Jamie, like many other people, have been through a lot of different experiences with services. Some services can be great, others can not follow up on what her expectations might have been of them or what they've said they would do and they haven't done. So I think authenticity as a worker is extremely important. And then it's being consistent too. It's following up on what you say you will do and when you will do it. That's a really important part of building that relationship. And for some people, you know, to build that trust, they need to see that that practical work happening, that things are changing quickly, because on a therapeutic level, that can take some time, but at a practical level, you can get some things happening quite quickly that shows your commitment to working with this person. It's taking in an easygoing nature, a non-judgmental nature, listening, let her lead the conversation, you know, and ask appropriate questions. You know, it's like a lot of people in Jamie's situation have told their story over and over and over again, and the story becomes very detached from who they are. So they will have a story that they tell people, but when they get safe and comfortable with a worker, the true story starts emerging. So it is about listening, about being authentic. It's about being mindful of what information you need. Do you need to know everything about her past? Is that appropriate for the work that you're doing now? You know, what happened when she was a child or whatever. So be really mindful of the questions that you ask, particularly at the beginning, because you don't want to ask really challenging questions that shut her down. Anyway, there's some of the ideas we had.
Absolutely, thank you.
Lisa's group would be next if they've got anything to add.
The only thing we might have added at the start with question 1 was we did have quite a conversation about addressing her basic needs initially too. So just around, you know, safety and again, especially around the partner. And other, you know, short-term needs. So, but other than that, our conversation was much the same. We also just had a conversation around the coaching model, and so approaching the conversation with Jamie using a coaching model approach.
The other thing I had to kind of catch myself up on as well, because I'm a family violence worker, and someone in our group kind of mentioned, hold on, let's not make assumptions about that relationship. and also because it doesn't necessarily say what that relationship was, if there was control or violence or anything. And then the other assumption that I think we made, and I did as well, is that we've assumed that Jamie's a woman, and I think it's kind of like, hold on, let's start at the beginning. Let's not jump to conclusions and ask those open questions and actually get to know the situation authentically. So thank you.
Thank you. Jamie is indeed a female. I don't know if I mentioned that when I was given a snapshot of the case study. If I didn't, I do apologize. And I gave a bit more context in the group that I was in, because obviously we did have to kind of condense the case study into dot points, but I was able to give more, I guess, meat to the bone in the group that I was in, which doesn't help the other groups. So it's only a time factor. That's the reason. Okay.
3 and 4 were Belle and Ruben's groups. So maybe we could start with Belle, Brian.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Bronwyn and Brian. Talking about understanding of the term homeless, well, no stable accommodation, transient, safety of the accommodation, coming and going, the lifestyle choice, the capabilities, but other factors involved, like backpackers. You class them as homeless because, this is going off track a tad, but, they have the money, but they choose to sleep elsewhere than paying for accommodation. So, and then other reasons for homelessness is family violence, and also the, being maybe in the family home, being asked to leave or having to leave, coming back again. So that can be sporadic. They could feel homeless even though they're back in their home again, because it's not always permanent. It's like moves around a bit. And then about the the 3 issues contributing to Jamie's recurring mission, just having no formal and informal supports, and the mental health disorders, the schizophrenia, the eating disorder, the substance use and the suicide attempt, and also no stable accommodation, but also for the partner, with the incarceration and all that, just all, can be quite overwhelming for that person at that time. So just it has an effect on their mental health.
Absolutely, and just getting to the first point you made, and understanding the term homeless, and there are people that, for safety reasons, would rather sleep rough than access accommodation at some of these motels, some of these boarding rooms, these houses, shared accommodation. That can be quite tricky environments in terms of safety, in terms of some of the people that frequent those environments. So there are quite a few people that we've worked with who would rather sleep on the street at a train station in the city because it's safer there than it is to access a motel or one of these hotels. Quite often than not, they can be quite intimidating environments.
Thank you.
Ruben,
sorry, I'll jump in. Yeah, I guess just to reiterate then, we had a very similar response in terms of question 3. I think the language that we used was comfortability. So not just that permanence, but comfort with the accommodation. So whether that's sort of just the physical environment, but also emotional, social, and what that looks like for somebody. So yeah, the stable, continuous accommodation being something that's sort of a secondary to a lot of the other factors that play into it too. In terms of the 4th question, identify at least 3 issues contributing to Jamie's recurring admissions. We had a whole slew of different things. So calling out, obviously, the substance use, mental health, partner in prison. We were sort of quite concerned, I guess, about the lack of discharge planning and connection with services after exit from ED, emergency admissions. compliance with medication as well. Obviously, complexity there when it comes to the anorexia, as well as polypharmacy, particularly with some of the diagnoses. And I think we sort of questioned, you know, trauma history as well. Long-term engagement with a bunch of services, probably turning them off to engaging with other services in future. But I think those are the only other things that we touched on.
Fantastic. So Brian, the next two groups would be for question 5 and 6 will be Alf's group and Stephen's group.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first if that's all right.
Fantastic.
Okay, so with my group, our question was, what are some of the barriers Jamie faces in accessing healthcare? We had one of the first things was when you're maybe transient, you don't have proof of address, and this could be a barrier with accessing it. Some services won't, you know, engage without that. So huge barrier. Transport was one of the ones. Also, if indeed, you know, get an appointment and taken in, I guess. So also hesitancy, maybe having bad previous experiences, also expectations about what are the clear expectations for what could happen in that environment. Like maybe in the past, yeah, there may have been a bad experience, and now moving forward, maybe there needs to be more preparation of what it could mean to go into that clinical environment and address those particular concerns. How will they help? Which one, you know, priorities as well. What takes priority at this time? Also, the accessibility due to the restrictions that COVID has made in everyone's lives, specifically for this case study, I guess. Maybe they don't have a phone or credit, and even engaging with telehealth, which may be the only way that they could access that particular health service, is going to be a barrier. And there's a lot of anxiety generally. We discussed also about the fear and anxiety around what COVID, you know, has represented for us. So yes, it could be a barrier also entering into a space, you know, walking through a door, being out, moving around. Can I do this? Am I going to get in trouble? Am I, you know, just so many questions and fears, depending on what their awareness is in this case and how they feel about it. But definitely we addressed that. Let me just have a look. They might have denial about their diagnosis and not really be, you know, have the sense that it's an important part of their healing journey. So that's also, I guess, that priority factor. Are they ready to be engaged on that? Do they see it as their clear priority? And how could that be helped to make that a priority if it seemed to be? On question 6, what are the key characteristics of quality healthcare for people who identify as homeless? What we came up with in our discussions was basically what is the priority for the client, which I guess is, you know, really I've just mentioned before, but making it client-centered, I guess, to really revolve around their priorities and identify them, help with identifying what they are. I guess that's a journey in itself. That availability of services when that person is ripe. I use the word ripe, it's my personal word, because I see it like you go through cycles, and ripeness is, you know, when you reach out, you may be at the very important stage of making some progress, but if that service is not available for you, you have to go on a waiting list, you may evolve out of that ripeness and go through a cycle where you're not when engagement's going to be less easy for you or your support services. Also, prioritizing the housing stability, because stabilizing one's health, having housing is just such an important part. We agreed that housing stability could be a foundational part of the quality healthcare outcomes. Also, we discussed how the office spaces and places where people are going are quite often very intimidating environments, and they may trigger very bad past experiences, similar environments. And so therefore there may be barriers there in accessibility for people, engaging people in those spaces. And maybe there needs to be a stronger emphasis on maybe engaging this person in an environment that's calmer and less intimidating, and then being able to work on those barriers and find a way forward into those healthcare spaces with a bit more support. So I guess identifying how she feels about those spaces and accessibility of them. And I think
thanks, Elf. We might move on because we've got to get to the break, but that was excellent, very comprehensive.
Absolutely, thank you for that. And just a quick point about, we're talking in question 5 about the barriers. We are quite unique to an extent, EHOPs, because we're created in the midst of a pandemic, EHOPs, the COVID, and so we haven't had to adjust existing processes. We had to create processes to work around the challenges that COVID and the lockdown presented. So that was fascinating for us and good for us as well. Okay.
So it's just Stephen, have you got just a couple of quick points to add, or from your group?
I mean, fortunately, a lot of what's already been discussed with the previous 5 groups there's very much an overlap with what we talked about as well. But I guess I'll just try and pick out maybe a couple of things that haven't been covered as much. It was a really good discussion with the group, and we got off the discussion talking about having a strength-based approach, which really comes back to a good initial assessment and exit planning from their service to understand what is Jamie's own understanding of their situation. So coming from it, coming to the scenario, helping Jamie getting an understanding and helping Jamie build an understanding of what their situation is to best access services. So we talked a lot about gaps, potential and very present gaps in services, but particularly when a person is homeless, the very nature of the poverty trap of a lot of assistance you can't get from Centrelink unless you have a fixed address, but you need that assistance because you don't have a fixed address. So we talked about some practical strategies about services that can provide a fixed address just for the purposes of receiving documents. And just following on from what Brian said in his initial presentation, that the big thing about not having access to a mobile phone, not having a reliable fixed point of entry for IAP services with homelessness. You'll be pleased to know that one of our participants gave a really good anecdotal breakdown of what their experience getting help from EHOPs is and how that's helped. Yeah, we talked about the difficulties in a person say falling into different catchments and becoming something of a what I'd call the handball or the hot potato, and the difficulty of getting them to a service. And it was good what Brian was just saying about the adaptations to COVID, because so much of the existing infrastructure for homelessness is built around trying to nail down a person to a specific service or area, and that we all probably know that the reality of dealing of trying to assist someone out in the community who doesn't have a fixed address, that's just not the case. It's very difficult. So yeah, we talked about planning.
We might have to go. I'm sorry. We've just run out of time, and I would love to hear Brian just to quickly tell us about what happened.
Okay. Sorry, Steve. That was fascinating. Thank you for that. This is just a snapshot of what we've done in working with Jamie thus far, her outreach clinician. And we're trying to move away from personally our team from the term case management, because a lot of the times when you engage with people, they don't want to be seen as cases, and they don't want to be managed. So we call ourselves outreach clinicians. It might catch on, it might not. We'll see. But anyway, her outreach clinician is Alexis, and this is what she's done with her. We've been engaged with Jamie since May this year. She relapsed soon after our first engagement, and she went into hospital and discharged with on a CTO depot and all that. We tend to see her 1 to 2 times a week for face-to-face appointments. COVID and the lockdown was a challenge, and sometimes going dressed in full PPE can be just, it doesn't help in maintaining rapport to an extent, but we've got to be protective of both the consumer and ourselves. Shout out to Homeless to Housing with Each, an absolutely fantastic program. It has supported Jamie, it supports some of our other consumers, and they've helped with securing transitional property on her behalf. So fantastic. It's a wonderful service, and long may it continue. And with Jamie, she was moving across the outer and central east area, so we've been able to follow her across the eastern region. As I said, she's the Mental Health Tribunal upheld the CTO. We've supported her with the DSP application. We've got another fantastic service that we got into contact with about 2 months ago. It's called the Generosity Collective. It's wonderful. It provides, like I say, material aids, clothing, toiletries. All you do, they deliver as well to our office. You order the next day, you get a bag full of clothes, and it's fantastic. NDIS referral as well is in process, and we've referred her to our dual diagnosis colleagues. I had a clip of Jamie speaking, but I don't think we'll have time to play that, which is a shame, because it gives such fantastic perspective from a consumer.
Brian, you could. I mean, we can skip the Q&A if you like, and just forward you some of those questions to be answered. But if you want to play a little bit, it might be really nice for folk just to finish up the session.
Yes, I think that will be lovely to hear Jamie speak.
I'll stop sharing to let you do that.
Fantastic. So share screen, advanced, computer audio, share. I tend to speak to myself when I'm doing this. I'm more for WebEx than a Zoom, but here we go.
Are you able to provide us with some background information on how you became transient/homeless?
So I experienced some hardships. I was illegally evicted from my house in the middle of studying, and I took them to VCAT court and won, but the trauma of that discouraged me from looking for another flatmate, and some stressful bad news relating to a friend, I think was the start of a breakdown. And I just decided, well, I just didn't think about being homeless. I was just wandering the streets and didn't care, really. I think I was a bit depressed at that stage. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about some of your experience of homelessness?
I had great experiences. You learn to be resourceful, resilient, innovative. A lot of services that assist with washing your clothes, having a shower, even storing your items in a cage, so that you know, one of the hardest parts of being homeless is your luggage that you have to carry around with you from place to place so it doesn't get stolen, which it ends up getting stolen anyway, or you lose it, or it gets broken, damaged. So storage is a huge part of it. Meals, you have plenty of food. A lot of charities providing free meals and gift passes, and access to the cinema in summer when it's hot, or the hot pools like in winter when it's cold, the bathhouses. So there's a lot of generosity yeah, with being homeless, and comradeship amongst the homeless community. You know, you do make some good friends. You just steer clear of the dodgy people, which there's quite a few of. But you learn as you go, like to keep your valuables close, and who's trustworthy and good influence on you. Yeah.
Do you feel safe in your current accommodation that you're staying at?
So yes, I do. I'm currently in crisis accommodation. I've just been accepted into the H2H package from Launch Housing. So that's homeless to hotels or homeless to homes. Yep. So I'm in a crisis accommodation, a self-serviced apartment which has laundry facilities in the room, a kitchenette and a small bar fridge, a TV, and heating. So it adds to your mental health by being stable and knowing that you're safe and your home is secure, so that you can actually start to get back up on your feet, you know, buy some new clothes, buy, you know, a few things for yourself, and actually start looking to the future.
Cool. So you mentioned a couple of things that were difficult about being homeless.
Yeah.
Is there one thing that you think was the hardest thing about being transient?
Just not knowing, not being able to plan, or not being able to get further, because you're moving from place to place every day. There's no stability or security, and it can be very stressful, and you can't focus on your mental health or even some kind of like daily routine and structure, because you're constantly having to upload everything and move, and you're unsure what's going to happen tomorrow. It can be very stressful, and some of the things that would benefit you, like focusing on your mental health and your health in general, and eating well and getting a good night's sleep.
I'm so sorry, folks. I'm going to have to pause it there. I think it's such a fantastic interview. She's very articulate. She puts across her point with such clarity, and she's been a wonderful person to work with thus far. And we are achieving some positive outcomes. It's still early days, but yeah, she's wonderful to work with.
Thank you so much, Brian. Now, what we might do now is we'll go to a break, a short break, so about 10 minutes, but I'm going to be coming in just before 11, so I probably should do it now, just so that we can take that minute silence in a moment. So I'm just going to remind us all that Remembrance Day is held on the 11th of November each year, and that this is the anniversary of armistice that ended fighting with Germany in World War I. And people in Australia and many other countries observe a minute's silence at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, because that's when the armistice came into effect. So with this minute of silence, we will remember them. So I encourage you to take a break now. Take a minute just to remember those that have kept this country free and safe. And we will return at 10 past. Instead of 5 past. We'll return at 10 past, so you get a bit of a decent break. Thank you all, and thank you, Brian, very much. That was an amazing presentation. So please welcome Rose, Graham, and Gavin. And I'm just going to spotlight you now, Gavin.
Good. That's what spotlighting is.
Yeah, and I'll get Graham in a minute. Now, I just wanted to give you remote control. Just see if that works for you now, Gav.
Okay. We'll see what happens here. All right. Thanks, Bronwyn. So it's my pleasure, really, to be, I guess, sharing a presentation which is kind of hopefully going to support people to think about how to maximize success in working with people with a living experience of co-occurring mental health and substance use concerns. And in the presentation today, we're going to be referring to a few things. One, the 2021 Royal Commission into Mental Health Services report, the lived experience of knowledge and members of the Dual Diagnosis Consumer and Care Advisory Council, and the experience of the Eastern Dual Diagnosis Service. But we might start off by just introducing ourselves. So my name's Gavin Foster, and as part of my role, I manage what's called the Eastern Dual Diagnosis Service, and I chair the Dual Diagnosis Working Group. I might throw it over to Graham to introduce himself.
G'day, I'm Graham Mitchell. I've been with the Consumer Care Advisory Council for about 3 years now, and I'm a dual diagnosis survivor and carer.
Cool, thanks, Graham. And might throw it to Rose.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, yeah, cool. Hi, I'm Rose. I'm part of the DDX Council, and I have a lived experience, and I've also done some studies in mental health and AOD.
Cool, good on you. Thank you, Rose. So it should work for me now, Bronwyn, is that right? I'm just trying to go to the next slide. Let's see what happens. There we go. Next slide. So thank you. All right, so today's discussion is informed by the dual diagnosis in tandem co-production model. And we have been working for a little while, well, say more than 10 years actually, as a group of clinicians, practitioners, consumers and carers in supporting, I guess, the conversation within the Eastern region around how to work within the dual diagnosis or the co-occurring mental health and alcohol and drug service base, and providing advice to lots of different services and organisations and how to do this work. So this presentation today, I'm very proud to say, has been a culmination of a number of years of work, and it's very much guided by the thoughts of Graham and Rose and myself and all of those people that we actually work with in terms of our in tandem model. I'm very proud to say, actually, we've been doing this co-production stuff for a little while. So, next slide. Ooh, why aren't you not working for me? Sorry, Bronwyn, it doesn't seem to be kind of moving for me. Here we go. All right. Oh, it has now. So, so in terms of the dual diagnosis kind of definition, well, what is it? Well, it's been around for a little while with lots of different definitions around the comorbidity or, co-occurring, co-presenting. Basically, it means, these two interacting conditions around substance use and mental health. I've kind of called it the fad that never fades because about 6 years ago, people were trying to say, dual diagnosis, is that still an issue? Haven't we kind of addressed that? And I was saying, actually, no. And like a number of us were saying at that point in time, no. And people, I guess, were trying to treat it like we do, and sometimes in health, like we kind of have these fads that we get excited about. And I'm going, this one is not going away until we actually start working on it. So fad that never fades. As I say, there's some other terms around comorbidity, coexisting, co-presenting. There's also been more recently discussed the mental health definition, the definition from the Royal Commission into Mental Health Services, which is mental health, substance use and addiction. I would probably say that the in tandem model is that we actually prefer mental health and substance use concerns. We think it's more representative of the broader issues. So within the Royal Commission observations, let's see, it's kind of moving a bit slowly. Sorry, this next change. But within the Royal Commission, there are a couple of statements. Here we go. Around what local health and mental health and wellbeing services should look like in the future. And when I say the future, this is by the end of 2022 that we're going to be comprehensively meeting the needs of consumers living with mental illness and also addiction or substance use. And we also are going to be making sure that we're not going to be excluding people from mental health treatment, care or support on the basis that they also need support for substance use and addiction, and that we have the right clinicians and practitioners in place to provide integrated care and treatment. So that's a pretty exciting next step. And so the other thing that the Royal Commission has provided us, which will come up in a moment, is around a few models. Actually, here we go. So a few models in terms of what integrated treatment can actually look like. And so they've given us some guidance around, this idea that it's in-house, a one-stop shop style of treatment, which particularly within clinical mental health services is going to be the expectation that people are going to be treated for both their mental health and their substance use issues within there. Hopefully putting an end to kind of some of the flawed models where we do the referral on, if you like, to services. People don't necessarily engage with alcohol and drug treatment from there. There's also some good models around co-location and care coordination and partnerships, and where we look at kind of different approaches where they might actually and I think go well, and I think that might actually be a real focus for our local area mental health services that are going to be starting to commence in next year. And then there's a third one which I do have direct experience of, which is the service delivery partnerships, and that's where we actually collaborate with services around providing opportunities for to provide support to both issues. And for example, we've got a really good partnership with Anglicare, the dual diagnosis kind of workers from Anglicare, where they actually come into our psychiatric inpatient units and engage people around an alcohol and drug and mental health conversation. And hopefully what that will happen is that they'll engage with Anglicare after they've had their inpatient admission. So the next slide that we're going to come to really is just some thoughts around some messages that I'm going to ask Graham to commence with. And these are dual diagnosis Consumer and Care Advisory Council messages. So Graham, I might just throw it over to you.
Thanks, Gavin. So for a number of years, the Dual Diagnosis Council has been talking about integrated supports, and some of their topics that they've come up with out of the hundreds that have gone across the table is to try and stop people from falling through the cracks and pull people out of the cracks that are already there as a result of our broken system. Understanding that there's different solutions for different problems. It's not a one solution fits all. And, if we don't talk about dual diagnosis and we don't talk about the interrelationships between substance use and mental health with consumers right from the front door, then the conversation's not going to happen. That's basically the most important thing. From my own perspective, dual diagnosis, brand new thing. 4 years ago, at the age of 58 years, I'd not heard of dual diagnosis, despite having lived with dual diagnosis for the best part of 46 years. At Eastern Health, for the last 10 years, there's been a resolute team of clinicians, consumers and carers who've been refining this integrated process of person-centred recovery. Pardon me. It's a practical strengths-based recovery support. It's proved so effective that it was been adopted by the recent Royal Commission into Mental Health as the foundation on which mental health and wellbeing systems are to be built in the future. Within the next few years, under this reformed system, we will have the opportunity to re-engage people who fell through the cracks in the broken system. We'll also be offering renewed hope of recovery for them and for the new consumers who come into the system for the first time. For some, it'll be a clinical recovery. For others, it'll be a psychosocial recovery. And sometimes it'll be a mix of both. And unfortunately, for some people, there won't be a good outcome. The work is not about fixing people. It's all about improving their quality of life. Whatever the outcome, I can assure you that dual diagnosis recovery is possible. And the main part is if you believe that, so can your patients. We'll go on to the next slide. Thanks, Gavin. The Dual Diagnosis Carer Consumer Advisory Council messages in relation to judgment. Judgment and stigma go hand in hand with this lived experience. We have been in the silo system for so long where we go one place for mental health. They say, no, you'll have to go and get your substance use fixed. Go the other way. They say, no, go get your mental health fixed before your substance use can be dealt with. It's an impossible system. In the time we have today, I can't immunise you against judgment and stigma towards a consumer who refuses to help themselves and follow the excellent advice that's provided to them. What we can offer you is the wisdom of lived experience from our consumer carer advisory team that constitutes 140 years of recovery from 280 years of mental ill health and addiction. Nothing provides hope and eradicates judgment better than 140 years of combined recovery experience. So if you take nothing else away today, I assure you that dual diagnosis recovery is possible. And if you believe it, so can your patients. Back to Gavin.
All right. Thank you very much, Graham. So I guess there was a question too that we did pose, and we wanted to ask, because Graham and Rose have actually got lots of questions for the group to consider, and one of these was, what are people's thoughts? Just maybe as a quick exercise, how is it that judgmental behaviour and conversation may appear? So I'm just wondering if people actually have some thoughts, and I can't necessarily see the screens, and so it might be that people need to chime in. But has anybody got some thoughts about how it actually might appear from ourselves to people we're working with?
You can either use the chat or you can just unmute yourself and respond to Gavin's question about how judgmental behaviour and conversation might appear to others.
Yeah, we've got tone in conversation I've seen there already.
Just, letting slip certain terms might come out, or it's just in the language that you use where you might not think that has an impact, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Beauty. Thank you very much for that. And I've also seen body language is kind of another way that we can show it. Graham, I see, is nodding his head to that one. There can also be assumptions made that we can be coming from a position of wanting someone to stop substance use. So that's already putting some judgments there in place. And that we can dismiss concerns by the client or the carer. Maybe it's that we're not giving enough time in terms of listening. And then also it's kind of things like telling them what they should do or what's best for them. So I think that Graham, do they sound like kind of, I think that sounds like some pretty good feedback from the group, really.
Yeah, I love it on the other end of a telephone when people will say, hold the line, can you hold the line? Can you hold the line?
Absolutely.
There's other things more important than talking to you right now. And yeah, sure, we've got to tell people to hold the line. We get a lot of, oh yeah, okay. So, I've got an alcohol problem and I've got PTSD. Oh yeah, okay. Big deep breath on the other end of the phone. Oh no, not another one. So a lot of consumers talk about hearing that sort of thing, and when a consumer is seeking help, they can be hyper vigilant and hyper aware of all these little pushbacks, that many of which they've experienced for whatever the period of their ill health has been. So it could be 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 30 or 40 years.
Absolutely. And Graham, I've just seen another comment here, being mindful that they are the experts of their life and not giving the impression that the worker or the organisation are the experts. We just have the knowledge and skills that are shared with clients to help them. So I think that's a fantastic comment too. So Graham, was there anything else that you wanted to say particularly before I throw to Rose?
No, I think that's keeps me happy.
Very good. Thank you very much for everyone there. Okay, so now we've got, going back to the next slide here, is we've got what's the problem, and Rose has got some thoughts she'd like to share on this one.
Yep, I do. I certainly do. So there are often two perspectives. One is the problem as the consumer sees it, and number two is the way the service sees the problem that the consumer has. How does your service and co-workers few consumers living with a dual diagnosis. May I present you some rhetorical questions to get you thinking? Who is more deserving of treatment, those with mental health concerns or those with a substance use? And why is this so? Is a person with a physical ailment more deserving of treatment because you can see the problem? Did people with a mental illness do something to get their condition? Are people with mental health incapable or unaware? So all people with substance use concerns choose to be dependent. And finally, do you believe that someone must suddenly stop their substance use before they can seek treatment for their mental health and vice versa? Can you explain the logic behind this? And then it goes on to try and possibly describe the complexities of dual diagnosis. And it involves the type of substance and the individual's reaction to that, the person's mental health or susceptibilities, and it could be for self-medicating. It's just, yeah, it's just really quite complex in its nature, and must to consider self-care in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Rose and Graham, you both believe that it's very important for clinicians and practitioners to be looking at their own self-care when working in this space, because there's lots that can come up for clinicians and practitioners.
Absolutely. It's very stressful working with people with either mental health or substance use concerns. So clinicians need to be open and honest with their colleagues about how they're feeling and how they're dealing with all that.
Yep. All right. So Rose, you've got another slide to talk to here, which is around hard questions need asking.
Yep. This can be, like what Graham was just saying, this can be very difficult work at times, and I believe that compassion fatigue might be most prevalent in mental health and substance use treatment settings. And the DDCCAC recommends that clinicians and practitioners use self-care for themselves, as well as for the people that they help treat. And I had some hints and tips on how to best support consumers in the service. I believe that to have a belief that I can recover and support me in my improving my quality of life. Ask me what I want from your service. See if there's other services that could support me in other ways that would be helpful. Be flexible in your support depending on my needs and situation, and to meet me where I'm at. Don't be disappointed if I lapse, as they are part of the recovery journey. Make my appointments about me and make them fun. Make me want to attend your service by being friendly, polite, and listening to me. And this will make me a happier, more pleasant to people at your service, including you. Give me hope, even if it's just your hope in me, and support me. Let me know how you can help me. So there's the some tips and hints for your service from the perspective of a consumer, as this is a very large part of the treatment given is person and relationship based. Yeah.
Cool. That's great work. Thank you very much for sharing those tips and hints. I'm sure everybody's appreciating these tips and hints at the moment, Rose and Graham. Yeah. And I've just seen another comment on the systems that we work in hold judgment on many levels. They do not provide individualized care or access. So it's interesting too that sometimes I think the reflections, Graham and Rose, that you have about services can also be consistent with the reflections that clinicians and practitioners can also hold. So, and that's what I think we found in the tandem model, isn't it, with working together? So I think I'm right to now move to the next part of this presentation, and I think with what Rose and Graham have done, and Rose has kind of said hard questions need asking, and we think that this actually might be some time for some group work actually now. So we've got 3 scenarios and lots of questions, and we're going to break up into 6 groups again. And I think you've got all 3 scenarios to look at, and then to review the questions, and then we'll come back and have a chat about them once we spent some time doing that. And just so that you know, the questions. I think I've only got one of the questions of mine. All the rest are Rose and Graham's. They've got some questions for you to kind of consider.
Let's start with Stephen, actually, because Stephen got cut off a bit at the last one. So maybe we could work backwards, Gav. Is that okay?
Cool, go for it.
So Stephen's group has Aaron.
Yep.
Steve, do you want to tell us what you found in your group today?
Yeah.
And which questions you're answering as well.
That's right. We were talking, we had the, sorry, I'm just scrolling back to see which was which. Yeah, so we had, well, I've only got the 2, I assume they're the last 2. So we had, how do you think Emma sees Aaron's problem, and how do you think Aaron sees his problem? So again, really great discussion. Everyone contributed really well. So just going through some of my notes here, starting with what we think Emma's perception of this might be is, it's difficult to say because the scenario talks about Emma kind of talking to the parents. It's difficult to understand what the relationship is between Emma and Aaron, and that became a big kind of a hinge of our discussion. We don't know what exactly their relationship was previously and how it's changing. We noted that they're both in different stages of adolescence.
Yep.
So really looking through the scenario, as with the earlier one, we discovered a lot of the need for further questions and assessment. So how to tease out certain things. So, but we speculated about. It would be very unsettling for her. She would, I think it's fairly safe to say, as an 11-year-old, she'd have very, limited life experience or observations of any kind of, mental illness, of, how to interpret Aaron's behaviors and the change in his behaviors over the last several years.
Yep.
We talked about, someone brought up a really good note about the parental influence.
Yep.
Particularly in the families, you can take your cues from how your parents perceive the situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you had another question there too. What was that other question?
Yeah, so the second was what is Aaron's insight, or how do we think Aaron thinks about his situation?
Yep.
And again, there's a lot of overlap there. Like we've got a couple of clues here. You've mentioned that he's irritable, which suggests that he is definitely coming into conflict with family members. We don't know how much they know about, this incident with the big day out and so on. So yeah, he's probably, as most 17-year-olds would be lacking probably a really, robust insight into what's going on with him. How we need to talk to him more about, what his behaviors, what he thinks of them, how he is joining the dots or not joining the dots on, is his substance use just what we've got here? Graham made a really good point about the fact that Aaron is 17 years old. Alcohol is being mentioned. How is he getting that alcohol? Someone made a really good point about, I think it was Reese, sorry. There's a certain social pressures here. A lot of this could just be conforming to his peer social group, which he'd be particularly vulnerable to at that age and his lifestyle. He'd have a lot of stresses. He's not working. We're not clear on why. He may have lost his job. It was probably a casual job being Macca's. So there's tensions there. There's expectations of him that he does have his own disposable income source, and his parents would no doubt have an opinion about how that should be used and so forth. So yeah, there's probably a lot of stress that Aaron is under, and not necessarily. It'd be very surprising if he had a very, detailed or accurate insight into this.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for that, Stephen, and great work in that group too, because I think it just kind of highlights how important it is to understand how Aaron's kind of seeing things, but also how other family members may be seeing things, and how important that is to kind of complete the picture. So thanks, Stephen. Who was the next group there that we?
Elf's going to speak next about Aaron.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Elf.
Oh, no worries. So I made a lot of notes and I don't have much time. So trying to pick from the goodies. One of the last things we went over, we were talking about.
What was your questions?
Sorry, the question. Sorry, my questions. Oh, sorry, Bronwyn. The question was, is Aaron falling through the cracks?
Yep.
And then why is that a problem for Aaron and his family? So
yeah,
what we came up with is the parents might not know about services and how to reach out for help, being one of them. They may not even see it as a genuine problem. They just think it's a phase and a developmental stage. They also may not know much about the group he's of friends, and have connections with other parents and know what their values are and what influences he's having in different households. But possibly the age also being cusp of being a young adult to an adult in the services changing over, which ones are correct for him. They might have a denial about their teen's development and not be very receptive to his changing personality, and that he has different needs from them as parents, that they're not moving with the times of him becoming a young adult, and they might need to do some education on how to better support him and address the concerns that they're perceiving as maybe his problems, when maybe they're some based in some of their rigid ideas or lack of knowledge. So there were some key things that came up. I don't know where I'm at with time, but
no, I think that's pretty good. Thank you, Alf. And I think a great summary of just people can fall through the gaps, not only because it's about kind of service systems, but also it's about supporting families to actually understand when it's the right time to seek help. And I think you've actually kind of highlighted that quite nicely too. So thank you.
So we've got Belle next.
Belle.
And talking about Michael.
Talking about Michael, okay.
So Belle, if you just wanted to state the questions you had as well.
Certainly. What language do you use when speaking about your clients? Do you use terms such as maladaptive, lacking insight, misadventure, non-compliant, or any other words like this? What might be other ways of describing these terms? So what our little group came up with was encouraging, positive language, strength-focused. Also, one of the members brought up that the client may want to read their case notes. And so, you just need to be aware of what you actually document as well. There's also building insight, having effect of their substance on others, exploring positive and negative parts of that. Then we spoke about reasons for use package, purpose of the use, again, the pros and cons of the issues. And then the second question was, how do you encourage Michael to consider that recovery from living with a dual diagnosis is possible? And we have that there's always hope. Complex issues, break it down, tackle it just one thing at a time, knowing that support is there for the person with the worker, but also professional people can be complex with psychologists or psychiatrists, and also to believe in yourself. As Kerry said before, I am loved, I am enough.
Okay, that's very good. So I think having that positive message, and also maybe even a positive message about who you are, and then who you are is working with the person. So I think that there's some fantastic points. And so thank you, Belle. Who's the next group with Michael?
Heath of Fairbanks.
Me. G'day. Thanks
Peter.
for your presentation, Gavin, and Graham and Rose. Really, really good. So we had Michael, our questions, first question, what would happen if Michael suddenly stopped the substance use? How would it affect his mental health? So we noted he was on 4 different substances and has got anxiety and paranoia. So if he stops suddenly, possibly an increase in his psychosis, possibly a low mood if he's taking ice because it's an underlying depression.
Yep.
Then there's all the physical stuff around vomiting, headaches.
Yep.
If it's alcohol, he'll need some sort of medical withdrawal. For the heroin, he'll need, there's a lot of dangers around going off heroin and alcohol quite quickly. Opioid replacement therapy, possibly increase in impulsivity.
Yep.
As well, and possibly increase in, he's had 1 suicide attempt, possibly increase in suicide. Interesting point about not getting any substances may impact his social connections. That may be one of his only social connections that he's got. So the idea that that he may become more isolated and not to assume that all those sort of drug related relationships are particularly bad. And also someone said he may have a routine in getting up and doing something to obtain substances. So, what's his life going to be like without those relationships and the routine? So that's good. Yeah. Question 2, what are the common assumptions made in our services about people who use drugs and alcohol and have mental health problems? Another really good question about our assumptions. We started with an idea that some people who use drugs are sort of junkies, so therefore they're unworthy, they're undeserving of treatment. So this could be in our service, or it could be within the staff. They've caused their own problems. It's their choice. Someone said that they may get worse before they get better. It's not always the case. It may be true, but it may not be. That sometimes recovery happens quicker than what we think. Particularly when you challenge with someone who's got multiple and complex needs. The other assumption is perhaps that the drug and alcohol use is causing the mental health. Perhaps it's that if they go off substances, that will improve their mental health. So, go and get off your substance use and then your mental health will improve. It's an assumption unless you know what's causing what, very chicken and egg. If you take away drug and alcohol, it's going to fix all their problems. It's another assumption. We talked about assumptions of what is choice and behavior. And the assumption that there is choice, or the assumption that they don't have a choice. Both of those we need to be careful how we think about that. Finally, someone said that that if we're not looking after ourselves, which I'm glad self-care came up, that when we're really stressed and lacking supports ourselves, possibly that will affect our assumptions and how we work with someone. So we may have more negative assumptions if we're struggling to understand, or if we're struggling to get support. So it's a really good group. Thanks to the group for all that interesting info.
Fantastic. And I think that there are some wonderful things that you kind of raised in that about the dangers and actually just kind of stopping, but also kind of some assumptions that we can make that may not be helpful for people if we're holding them. So thank you for that. So Karen's our last scenario to...
You've got Lisa to speak first on this one.
Yep, cool. Thank you, Lisa.
Just unmute myself, make it easier. So yes, with Karen, the first thing that we talked about was actually about not referring so much to her problems, but rather asking her what she sees her needs are, and coming at it from her experience and looking at sort of barriers and issues. We had a lot of conversation around her children, And obviously with case scenarios, we don't know everything, but
Yep.
you know, not wanting to make assumptions that she does or doesn't want to have access to her children,
Yep.
what her the dynamic might be with the grandparents. Are they her parents? Are they the
Yep.
children's other grandparents? All of these kinds of things. So lots of conversations around that. Conversations around you know, taking it a gentle but clear approach. Sorry, I didn't say what our questions were. Our questions were, and I've moved on to the next bit. So what do we think are Karen's problems was the first question. And the second question was, how do you encourage Karen to consider that recovery from living with a dual diagnosis is possible?
Yeah.
So in relation to that second question, we were talking about the involvement of peer workers and having people connect with her who have that lived experience to, you know, tell her, you know, to tell her their story and to be able to share with her so that she can get that encouragement for the future, and then sort of meeting her with where she's at now, giving her, empowering her with the knowledge, so that, and taking a harm minimisation approach,
Yep.
so that she can make the decisions when she's ready.
Fantastic. That's good. That's great feedback. Thank you. And I think, so there are a couple of interesting questions there about how we see the problem, but then also how do we actually encourage Karen to hold hope for herself? So thank you very much, Lisa.
And last but not least is Faye's group.
Okay, Faye.
She's here.
Yes, I'm here. The first question for us was, how do you think Karen sees her problem? Well, first of all, we don't know. And she could see it from many different angles. You know, she could see that she doesn't have a problem, that this has been laid on top of her, and that it's not fair what's happened, or she could feel a whole lot of shame and guilt. She could bring in many, many different feelings to the room. And, you know, if we talk about assumptions, this is an interesting question because it puts us in the position of the person.
Yep.
And we can guess, but we don't know.
Yep.
And so the best way forward with that is to ask her, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than determining it for ourselves. And the second question is, if Karen is willing to speak of her mental health, but not her substance use, how would you work with her? Well, if we work in a client or person-centric way, we would say that's fine.
Yep.
And we would move forward and say, well, we'll put the drug and alcohol to the side. And if and when you're ready to bring it up, then we can move forward with that as well. And would focus on the mental health, and could focus on her children or whatever else she sees as a problem for her at that point in time. And then when she's ready, you can bring in psychosocial education around drug use and the impacts, and empower her, give her the knowledge to make some informed choices about what she wants to do with her AOD issues. So that's very quick. And there's a lot of other stuff, you know, it's rapport building, you know, being present, building that trust with that person. And then when that's established, because, you know, the AOD could be her lifeline at the moment. It's the only thing that's taking her through. And what happens if you try to take her lifeline away too quickly?
Yep.
You know, we can end up with some really challenge, or she can end up with her mental health being more severe or whatever. So that's the way we've kind of approached it.
Thank you very much, Faye. And I think really what I'm hearing from all of those groups is kind of very much that sense of empathy that we need to have, and that connection and understanding. So thank you very much for taking the time to go through those scenarios. I'm just going to quickly run through a couple of other thoughts from the dual diagnosis service perspective, which I'm quite pleased marry very nicely to what we've been hearing so far. So the dual diagnosis service has a dual diagnosis shared care kind of service. It's the only one of its kind anywhere at the moment where we're actually working in the clinical space. And within this role, our dual diagnosis clinicians work side by side with treating teams in the clinical mental health service to provide guidance around how to work well within this. And so in this space, and so the things, and because it's kind of a new service, we've been learning these things which are very similar to what we've been hearing. So we've been hearing things like, the engagement is really important. I did that, did I? Sorry, go back. So yeah, but we've been hearing about engagement, understanding the person, strengths planning, and the appreciation of the impact of trauma and families, carers, and the need to be involved. So these are things that dual diagnosis clinicians have actually been learning as we've been piloting this model of dual diagnosis shared care. So what's actually happened out of this is that we've now been able to develop a dual diagnosis integrated treatment framework. And what we found important about this integrated framework is that it's important to understand things like the integrated treatment focus. Like we will have these things around engagement and assessment, implementing change, and the need to understand things like empowerment and recovery capital and planning for exit from the service. But there's also this therapeutic side of things, this therapeutic relationship that's happening. And it starts off with some of what we've been hearing about being respectful, empathic, non-judgmental, and kind of going through collaborative recovery kind of mechanisms, and then also supporting consumers to take the lead, and getting to kind of areas where we celebrate achievements and recognize vulnerabilities and risks. So it's kind of, how do we plan for all of that? And then there's also the really important aspect that we talk a lot about these days is in the role of the family along on top. So within that, we've got these dual diagnosis clinician tasks that are kind of what we're seeing is really important, of having a good representation of both mental health and alcohol and drug work within this space. So I haven't got the time to go through it in more detail, but it might be something you'll be able to look at in your notes later. So if I move along to the next slide, and what I just wanted to do is highlight a couple of aspects of things that we found really important. And one of those is actually the stages of change. And the stages of change model is a really important model. And when I first heard about stages of change, it was actually from a mental health context. It's around kind of stages of change of people kind of being engaged with their treatment, but actually it's got its roots in the alcohol and drug area. So for me, what's really important about the stages of change is just highlighting the fact that pre-contemplation, people saying, oh, they're in pre-contemplation, so they don't want to do anything about their substance use. So therefore, that makes it a bit hard for us to work with them. And so maybe we shouldn't be working with them until they're ready for change. Well, in fact, what we've been arguing is that that is a great place to work with a person on. And that last conversation really around Karen, she didn't want to talk about her substance use, but we have a way in. She wants to talk about her mental health and kind of the other side of things. And we kind of see that as a key part of engagement. And there are kind of aspects to being in the pre-contemplation stage, which is from Carlo Di Clemente, and where they talk about that there are kind of different ways of looking at the pre-contemplation phase around kind of where people are kind of just partying, they're in the reveling phase, they're in the reluctance, they're not really sure about wanting to do anything, or maybe they're rebelling against the world and everybody, or maybe they're resigned to their fate, that no change is possible for me. And so that's why it's really important to hold out hope for people, and rationalization that they're not going to kind of listen to too many arguments, and that there's a reason for why they're going okay the way they're going. So there are just those aspects which I'll briefly, kind of just briefly mention. But then there's also this really important tool, which we believe is incredibly important, around understanding people's reasons for use. And whenever you're kind of having a conversation with a person who's got a serious mental illness, it's actually just not making, again, those assumptions about why people are using substances. And this is where we kind of talk lots about understanding the person. And then we have another thing, which I'm hoping everyone is really familiar with, which is the wellness plan for substance use and mental health concerns. It's really, really important around any relapse prevention that for people who have both of these issues, that you're talking to them about relapse for both of these issues. And this again has been something that's been co-designed by the Dual Diagnosis Consumer and Care Advisory Council with clinicians and practitioners. And we kind of really focus on this as strengths planning. We also think that trauma is really, really important, and there are good resources everywhere. We just highlight this one from the Matilda Centre at the moment, you know, until we actually see something else that kind of grabs our eye, and we'll talk about that a bit more. We think that this is a good resource. So acknowledging trauma is really important. And we also really want to kind of acknowledge the importance of family and carer involvement, and the fact that it is this all going well. It's this three-way triangle, and in terms of actually consumer, carer, family support person and clinician all working together. And I know that Rose and Graham had some thoughts that they wanted to share with this, but I think we've run out of time, Rose and Graham, and unfortunately. So we might have to hold this for another occasion. But Rose and Graham have some wonderful reflections to offer on this. And we'll just get to the last slide. Ooh, not moving right along, or second last one maybe. Okay, so this is, I like to finish on this because I think it's absolutely perfect for how we sit for today. And this is an empathy mantra, which is developed by Ken Minkoff. When individuals with mental illness and substance use, they're not following recommendations, they're doing their job. Their job involves coming to terms with the painful reality of having both a mental illness and substance use, wanting neither one, yet having to build an identity that revolves around treatment for both. Our job is to join them in it. And it's about to come up in a moment. Please, this is, and you're about to see the exciting conclusion as to what our job is. And it will come here any second. Here it is. This is our job, to understand their job, to join them in that, and to actually help them do it better. And I think that you've all illustrated in your conversations today how important that work is, particularly through the scenario conversation. And I think just as final, I'd like to say thank you very much for everyone participating today. Graham, is there any quick last comments you'd like to mention?
Just believe, if you believe that there's recovery and it's possible, so can your clients.
Absolutely. Great comment. Rose, a last comment from you?
No, I don't have any further comments, but yeah, it was pretty good sitting in the meeting and being a part of it. So thank you for that.
Cool. Great comment too. That's great feedback as well, Rose. So that's the end for today. Thank you very much, everybody.
Wow. Thanks, team. Amazing. What a thorough walkthrough we've just had. I'm just going to replace the spotlight. There we go. Yeah, so what a thorough walkthrough we've just had of the dual diagnosis work, the people, and such a lot of lived experience embedded in there. So thank you, Rose and Graham and Gavin, for everything that you shared and supported us in our conversations today. Some really interesting conversations in the breakout rooms too, so thanks for that. And that's Gavin's email address, but you'll get a copy of the slides. I'll send them to you as soon as this meeting is over. And what I'll do is, if anybody's put anything into the Q&A, I'll send those questions to the presenters and they will provide their responses in a written format, and then I'll email them out to the whole group. So feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A in Slido if you'd like to do that now. I just want to thank all our presenters today and the group facilitators and the event crew. It takes a lot of people to put on an event like this. Thanks to Ruben Sago for technical support, and I'm really sorry about your technical problems on your own end today, and that's never happened before for Ruben, so I'm sure they'll be sorted out. And to Tom Larkey for managing all the attendees and the breakout rooms, a huge job. We acknowledge our sponsors, the Eastern Melbourne PHN, the Department of Families, Fairness of Housing and Eastern Health. And most of all, thank you for being here and working together with a willingness to improve our response to people who have complex support needs. It wouldn't happen without the people participating. And we'll see you all again next week on the 18th in the morning from 9 o'clock again. And we're going to hear from Belinda Henry about Complex Care Initiative and how to manage risk as a care team. We're going to hear from Laurel and Kevin about gambling and mental ill health, and Pauline Kelly about family violence and mental ill health. So once again, thanks for joining us today. Please take a moment now to go into Slido and provide your feedback in our quick survey. It's really important to us to have all that feedback, and we really shape our events based on what you say. So see you next week, folks. Thank you.
Thanks, Bronwyn.